Today we're painting a coffee van in a park, and we'll be keeping things fairly loose with lots of relaxing brush sounds, and then finish up with some scribbly penwork for those sketchy details. First, let's wash the outside areas with light lemon yellow, mixed with the smallest touch of May green. Now I've got to tell you, this is a new brush and you can see that it's shedding all over the place. I'd better sort these hairs out now before my painting needs a skin fade. Now a bit of Prussian blue for the sky. Just a light base so I can find my way around the composition a bit better. It's a park setting, so I'll paint in a few trees, starting with the trunks in burnt umber with tight little vertical marks for a sort of woody texture. For the canopy, I'll add more May green into my previous lemon yellow mix for the bulk of the leaves. I'll increase the strength of that green just a touch and pop some of it down on the ground to give the trees a little bit of a foundation. Back to the foliage, I'll splash in permanent green, favouring the lower and right hand sides of the canopy to add some natural shading. I'll carry that colour down into the grass too, so everything feels connected. Now a bit of brilliant green, just dotted around to add a little sparkle and variation in tone. For the ground, I'll start with a wash of yellow ochre blended with a touch of Indian yellow. and I think I'm going to experiment by adding a hint of Prussian blue. It's a contrasting colour and maybe a bit of a maverick move because I'm not entirely convinced that works, but let's live life on the edge. Now to the main focal point, the coffee van. I'll lightly brush it in with Prussian blue across the bodywork. Inside the cabin, the little coffee shop itself, I'll use yellow ochre to bring a bit of warmth and light into the space. Now that those washes are down, let's strengthen the Prussian blue and start adding some weight. I'll use yellow ochre again to define some of the shaded areas along the wooden panels, keeping the strokes going in the direction of the grain. I was visiting the US recently, and I think I might have noticed a bit of a culinary gap in the market for jacket potatoes. Now, I know that sounds a bit tame and maybe even a bit grim and British. I know we don't have the best reputation for our food, but hear me out because not all potatoes are equal. I'm talking about those double cooked, fluffy, buttery potatoes with really crispy, salted skin. Beans and cheese, optional but highly encouraged. I mean, here they're a real staple, a bit of a comfort food. Maybe that's a terrible idea. I have no idea of the market over there. Let's work on some of those shadows, and for that I'll use a bit of indigo. Start building up the darker areas, working around those corners outwards. Now with a darker concentration of indigo, I'll start sketching in a few details. The suggestion of a coffee machine and the back of someone working away. I'm keeping the brush quite dry here, rough, sketchy strokes. Less is more, I think. Let the imagination fill in the gaps. A little mark now for a display case where biscuits and cakes will no doubt be tempting customers. delicious, but definitely sold at eye-watering prices. Still, there's something about a park coffee that always feels worth it, isn't there? Next, I'll deepen the Prussian blue for the underside of the van, getting in those wheel arches and tyres. I'll add a touch of indigo for a bit more depth and shadow. Yellow ochre now for the wooden legs of the blackboard. And let's use a dash of English red down the darker side of some of the wooden elements, like the table and the blackboard. I'll wash in a layer of indigo for the blackboard itself. And add more of that tone to the back of the van where the shadows are at their strongest. To brighten the interior, I'll bring in Indian yellow, a favourite cheery colour of mine, and I think it'll offer a nice, soft, inviting glow. A bit more indigo around the wheels now. And I'll use that same colour to hint at the wheels on the far side. And brush some of that onto the ground for the van shadow. Now a few touches of opaque white to catch the light along the bodywork. To make the van a little more interesting, I'll work in some brilliant green. just enough to lift the colour and give it some life. The ground is looking a bit flat, so I'll break it up by dotting in more opaque white. That'll add texture and break things up a little bit. Let's add a bit more sunshine into the image, brightening up those background trees with touches of cadmium yellow hue. And to balance that warmth, I'll dab in some olive green yellowish into the darker areas for contrast. For the staff member, I'll use Naples yellow for the skin tones, being careful not to overdo it so she doesn't end up looking like she's been stung by a wasp. A few more dabs of opaque white on the van, trying to add a bit more polish and shine. Now let's give that sky a bit more presence with Prussian blue mixed with a hint of violet. And with a wet brush, feather that out so that there's no sharp edges that catch the eye and distract. I'll carry a little more of that violet under the van as well. Add a bit of lift to what was just flat colour. A bit more opaque white in the foreground to continue toning down the sea of yellow ochre. Now let's get busy with a pen and start scribbling away, sharpen things up a little bit. I'll keep my line work focused on the van and the foreground, staying away from those trees so that they remain sort of out of focus and pushed into the background. Let's jazz up the van with a touch more violet. And a bit of ultramarine to bring out the blues. Finally, I'll go in with a stronger value of yellow ochre to give the foreground a bit more texture and warmth. And there we are, a scribbly little coffee van in the park. Thanks for watching, and now it's definitely time to go grab a coffee.